Welcome to Podcasting While Nerdy, where we break down the best in nerd culture, one episode at a time. Today we're diving into The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2. From tense showdowns to emotional callbacks and subtle nods to the game, this episode gave us a lot to unpack. Whether you're a die-hard fan of the series or just along for the ride, you're in for some in-depth analysis, wild theories, and maybe a few nerdy tangents. Let's get into it. Some episodes leave you stunned, others leave you gasping. The Last of Us. Season 2, Episode 2, Through the Valley, leaves you curled up on the floor in the fetal position, questioning whether you'll ever trust TV again. That might sound dramatic, but this show didn't just break hearts. It stomped on them with the weight of a story that's not afraid to make bold moves. And by bold moves, we mean they killed Joel in Episode 2. This episode was always going to be a turning point, especially for fans of the game who were nervously clutching their emotional support mushrooms, cordyceps pun intended, knowing what was coming. But even with that knowledge, nothing prepares you for the execution. What makes Through the Valley so brutal isn't just what happens, it's how it happens. The pacing, the silence, the music, the way Ellie's scream echoes more painfully than any explosion. HBO didn't just adapt the game's most controversial moment, they gave it more emotional weight, more cinematic polish, and somehow even more heartbreak. But here's the real kicker. The show doesn't wallow. It doesn't cue the violins. Okay, maybe a sad guitar riff here and there. Instead, it does what The Last of Us does best. It puts the weight of the world on its characters' shoulders and says, okay, now walk. And walk they do, right into a storm of grief, fury, and a thirst for vengeance that promises to define the rest of the season. The episode's title, Through the Valley, is a nod to the haunting track from the first game's trailer, but it's also a metaphor. This is the valley. This is the lowest point. And from here on out, it's all going to be uphill. Or at least, that's what we hope, even if our gut says the slope ahead is paved with more heartbreak and hard decisions. Emotionally, this episode is like being sucker punched by someone wearing a flannel shirt and carrying a guitar case full of trauma, and yet it's also beautiful. Poetic even, because The Last of Us has always been about love and loss, and how those two things are almost always tangled up in the messiest ways possible. So, buckle up. The rules have changed. The emotional center of the story has shifted. Ellie is no longer protected. She's the Avenger. The girl who once cracked puns about coffee is now staring down the barrel of her own fury. And if this episode is anything to go by, Bella Ramsey is about to carry this season like it's a backpack full of bricks. Ready to keep going into the darkness? Let's dive into the plot. Plot overview. Let's not sugarcoat it. Episode 2 throws us into emotional chaos within the first 15 minutes. The sense of dread kicks in early, creeping in like the slow groan of a bloater just outside the door. Joel and Ellie are on the road, still in Jackson, still basking in that brief, precious normalcy that television writers love to tear apart. There are quiet conversations, a little teasing, a rare smile, and then everything shifts. Joel's death came in suddenly, brutal, ugly. One moment he's there and the next he's on the ground, breathing raggedly through broken ribs and blood. The sequence is so jarring because of how stripped down it is. No slow motion, no soaring score, just raw violence that feels real in a way that leaves you breathless and a little bit sick. The showrunners knew what they were doing, making you feel it deeply, like Ellie does. Ellie's reaction, though, is where the episode's heartbeat truly lies. It's the scream. It's the shock in her eyes as the world tilts sideways. Bella Ramsey doesn't perform grief like a tearful monologue. She shows it in the frozen horror, in the disbelief, in the moment she drops to her knees beside Joel as if she just presses hard enough, she can glue time back together. That's what makes it hurt even more. Not just the loss, but the helplessness that comes with it. But the plot doesn't stop to let us grieve. Ellie is dragged away, kicking and screaming, and before we can even collect ourselves, we're introduced to the other side of this story, Abby, the woman holding the golf club, now suddenly humanized, her motives still unclear, but layered with enough emotional tension to make even the most game-faithful fans pause. We see glimpses of her group, firefly tattoos and hardened faces. There's weight behind their actions, though we don't yet know the full why. The episode doesn't give us all the answers. Instead, it gives us ripples. Tommy's anguish. Maria is trying to hold things together. Jackson's warmth was starting to feel more like a fragile dream than a safe home. Ellie's silence was growing louder by the minute. And Abby, cold, focused, and clearly carrying something heavy. What's brilliant here is how The Last of Us refuses to paint villains with one brush. Yes, Abby is the person who killed Joel, but she's also someone who lost something too. We just don't know what yet. That tension, the knowing and not knowing, hangs over every scene like a storm that hasn't broken yet. By the time the episode ends, Ellie is gone. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. You see it in the way she walks away from Jackson, sword of vengeance raised in her heart. She's not the same girl who told Joel that puns were underrated. She's a fire waiting to catch. And we're burning right along with her. Character performances. Let's talk about acting. And not just any acting, but the kind that punches you right in the gut, then gently taps you on the shoulder to remind you you're still watching a show and not living through personal heartbreak. That's the level we're working with in this episode. Everyone brings their A game, but it's Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal who turn what could have been a difficult watch into a masterclass in storytelling through performance. Pedro Pascal, even in limited screen time, reminds us why Joel has become one of television's most beloved characters. He's not loud, he doesn't make grand speeches, but every sigh, every glance at Ellie, every hesitant step says something. There's a quiet tenderness in his early scenes, like he's finally let himself believe in peace, if only for a moment. That's what makes his death hit like a freight train. It's not just that we lose Joel. It's that Pedro shows us the version of him that was healing, softening, maybe even becoming whole. And then, he's gone. Just like that. But let's be honest. This is Bella Ramsey's episode now. This is their stage, and they own every inch of it. From the moment the camera finds Ellie after Joel falls, we stop seeing a teenager. We see someone split open by grief and fury. Bella doesn't cry in the traditional Hollywood sense. They fracture, their body clenches, their voice cracks in a way that sounds more like a wounded animal than a person. It's uncomfortable and devastating and real. What's even more impressive is how Bella holds the aftermath. Silence becomes their tool. We see Ellie drift, unable to speak, unable to process, and then finally, consumed by something sharp and vengeful. In just one episode, Bella Ramsey takes us from disbelief to rage without ever once letting the emotion feel scripted or forced. This isn't someone acting sad. This is someone grieving in real time. And then there's Abby. Played by Caitlin Dever, she steps into a role that's already polarizing among fans and does it with a kind of steel-edged vulnerability that's immediately intriguing. Yes, she's brutal. Yes, she kills Joel. But there's a look in her eyes after it's done that hints at something more. Not regret, exactly. Maybe something like sorrow. Or maybe just exhaustion. Either way, Caitlin gives us enough depth in just a few scenes to make us realize this story isn't going to be black and white. Direction and cinematography. Sometimes the best way to make people feel something isn't through a grand speech or epic battle. It's through silence, stillness, a perfectly timed camera movement. And that's exactly what the direction and cinematography deliver in this episode. It's restrained in all the right ways, letting the pain sit with us instead of rushing to distract or entertain. Director Ali Abbasi doesn't try to outdo the drama of Joel's death with spectacle. Instead, he leans into the realism. The scene is quiet, almost eerily so. There's no dramatic music swelling in the background, just Joel bleeding out, Ellie screaming, and the awful reality of it all unfolding in what feels like real time. The camera doesn't flinch. It stays close, almost uncomfortably so, forcing us to be present. It doesn't let us escape what's happening. You want to look away. You can't. That sense of intimacy carries throughout the episode. Abbasi's direction is all about emotional proximity. Long takes, close-ups, and slow pans dominate the visual language. The camera lingers on Ellie's face in moments of silence, capturing every twitch of her jaw, every flicker of disbelief. It makes you feel like you're right there with her, sitting in the wreckage of what just happened, trying to make sense of a world that suddenly doesn't make sense anymore. The cinematography by Nadim Carlson complements this perfectly. The lighting shifts subtly as the story moves from comfort to chaos. Jackson is bathed in soft, golden tones, warm fires, snow-lit cabins, that dreamlike calm that makes you think, just for a second, maybe everything's going to be okay. Then when the violence hits, that light disappears. What follows is a much colder palette, blues, grays, the kind of muted colors that say something is broken now. There's one standout visual sequence that's hard to forget. After Joel's death, we see Ellie walking through Jackson alone. No music, no words, just snow crunching under her boots and the camera trailing behind her like a ghost. It's haunting, stark, somehow louder than any gunshot or explosion. That moment tells us everything we need to know. Ellie isn't just grieving, she's changed. Something in her has shifted, and the camera is quiet enough to let us feel it happen. Even the action, brief as it is filmed with clarity. The ambush scene that leads to Joel's death is chaotic, but never confusing. There's a frantic energy to the way the camera moves, but it never sacrifices spatial awareness. You know where everyone is, how it's unfolding, and just how fast things fall apart. More than anything, the episode's visuals create a mood, a heavy, lingering sadness that doesn't need to shout to be heard. This is a world still recovering from the apocalypse, and yet it's the personal losses that feel like the end of the world. That's the brilliance of the direction here. It doesn't rush past grief, it holds it, frames it, makes it art. Final thoughts. As the credits roll, you're left with more questions than answers. Where is Ellie going? What exactly is Abby's story? Can any of these characters come back from what's happened? The episode doesn't try to wrap things up neatly. Instead, it hands you the mess and dares you to follow. And yes, it hurts. It hurts a lot. But it's also compelling, brave, the kind of storytelling that doesn't hold your hand, but trusts you to handle the weight. It sets up a season that promises to explore what happens when grief becomes action, when love becomes war, and when good people do terrible things for reasons they believe are right. And that's our breakdown of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2. What did you think? Did the pacing work for you? Any Easter eggs we missed? Let us know in the comments or tag us with your thoughts. If you're enjoying these episode reviews, be sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It really helps us grow the nerdy community. More reviews, interviews, and geeky goodness coming your way soon. As always, stay alert, stay nerdy, and we'll catch you next episode.